Hello and welcome to Juicy Scoop. Juicy crimes today with my sister, attorney at law, Shannon McDonald Goldstein. She is here in the Calabasas offices because her son had a tennis match here in the Valley.
Hi, Heather. How are we doing?
We're good. We have a few different stories to discuss. The first one we're going to discuss is one I saw last night, so maybe you guys did too, on 2020 Friday night. It is a murder from 20 years ago, and it is the Belinda Temple murder. It happened in Katy, Texas, I think in 1998 or 1999 is when the crime actually happened. And I'll just tell you a little bit about it, and then you can ask me questions.
All right.
The audience can ask questions. So what is really juicy about this is that it's kind of similar to the Scott Peterson case.
Okay.
Which was the case out of Modesto where a guy's pregnant wife went missing. Eventually her body was found. He was eventually convicted of murder. When he was acting like he didn't know where she was, it was eventually found out that he was having an affair. And the defense is always like, does an affair really make someone kill their wife, So this was a couple years before that. And with this story, they were met in college. She was a big football player. They both became teachers. They both were working at the high school in Katy, Texas. She was doing special ed classes, and he was the football coach. And they had a little boy named Evan that was like 3 or 4 at the time, and she was 8 months pregnant with their daughter when he came home from doing errands with his son to see what looked to be like broken glass, like through a French door, entering his house. So he took the boy and ran to the neighbor's house and said, "Take my son. I think there's been a robbery or an invasion at my house." And then he went into the house and looked for his wife and found her dead, shot in the closet. And he called 911, and I guess he revealed that she was pregnant. And so the 911 officer was like, "Please try to do CPR because you might be able to save the baby based on, when she was shot." And he was like, no, I don't know. Her head is gone. It's over. She's dead. No.
Oh, that's a little alarming because that's his baby inside
Right.
of her.
So therefore, there was no blood on him because he didn't go rush to her side and pick her up and cradle her and say, not my Belinda.
Right.
Or try to do this,
And if he did it and it was
Yeah.
orchestrated, then obviously he's thinking ahead of time that he doesn't want any forensic evidence that would tie him to the murder case. So if he was holding her, trying to shoot her or whatever, and her blood was on him, etc.
Right.
He's probably watched enough crime dramas to know that might.
This was 20 years ago, so, it was still
it
happening.
wasn't like 1900s.
Yeah.
Right.
So the gun was they never found the weapon, but the bullets that were used were ones from a traditional 12 gauge shotgun, a certain kind of gun, but this is Texas. A lot of people have these big hunting 12 gauge shotguns.
Okay.
And he was a hunter, so he has one.
Okay.
Okay. But so they start, questioning him and everything. They also question. It also looked like a robbery, yet nothing was taken. So the TV was fallen, drawers were opened, her jewelry box, it's clearly a jewelry box on her dresser, nothing was opened or moved or even looked at.
Okay.
Then next to the TV was a plate of like all of his jewelry, which included like a really expensive college, not Super Bowl big ring, but whatever college ring, his wedding ring, a big gold chain, some other stuff that would have been valuable.
And you'd expect to be gone if it was a legitimate.
Right. And then the other thing about the French door that was broken, so it's like a French door where someone would have smashed it in, put their hand through, and then able to then open the door. So one of the things that the prosecution found, interesting, or what with their case, is that the glass that was shattered into the house was not where it would be if the door was shut. It would be if the door was already opened and it was to the right.
Okay.
So they think someone could open the door because they lived there.
Right.
Then they broke it.
Right.
Let it shut, and then they shut it.
Right.
So
Were there actually studies done on that, or is it just like an investigator? Did they get like basically
There was
an
still
expert?
one piece of glass that was in the front, like where it should be, but the rest was all to the right.
Okay. I'm curious to see if they hired an expert to sort of evaluate that scene, or if that was just based on common sense. I would just be curious on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is, obviously this is just us like discussing the
No, I
juiciness
know,
of
but I'm
it,
just
so-
kind of
Yeah.
curious if they did.
Yes. So he, is very sad. They have the funeral, and it later, he answers the questions, and later on, they find out that he has been having an affair with this single teacher named Heather Scott. And
Another Heather.
yes, and I don't know. I don't agree with her marrying this person or having an affair, but she is hot. She's smoking hot, according to the female prosecutor. I thought that was kind of weird. That
How
she said it.
weird, yeah.
Yeah, when she says it, she's like,
Maybe she wants
she's
some
like,
Heather.
she's blonde, she's young, and quite frankly, she's smoking hot. And she's not smoking hot. She's pretty.
I
She's
know.
pretty cute. She's thin. She's blonde, blue-eyed.
But it looks like
No.
Belinda Temple is
Yeah,
cute.
Belinda was cute too.
Right.
So, anyway, though, still not enough to, even though they kind of make it like they're clearly thinking it's him.
Mm-hmm.
His own family then gets concerned. They get an attorney, to cover the tracks. They're like, it looks like a witch hunt. They're not trying to find someone else. But one of the things that was interesting is this other teacher that was also married. They'd all go out to happy hour after. Heather Scott, the other teacher, and David Temple, the husband. And
not Belinda, because wouldn't
Belinda never joined them for
Okay,
happy hour.
all right.
Maybe because she's pregnant and had a 4-year-old to pick up from
Yeah.
the daycare.
Yeah.
And so, no, she was not part of this fun new group. And they were on a different part of campus, these
Okay.
people. They were in the new 9th grade center or something. And they'd go to happy hour all the time. And major flirting was happening. And she actually made out with the other guy who was married as well. And he admitted to it.
Heather.
Yes.
Heather did. Oh, so she's kind of getting around.
But so it's almost like a love triangle. But David, the husband, is like coming in strong, and her roommate at the time testified that yes, he was coming over, he was doing things with her, and Belinda's friends had said at that time that she was not happy, very annoyed with how much she was gone, and she didn't share like that she thought he was having an affair with anyone, but like her twin sister came to visit, and there was just a lot of tension, and she said something to the effect of like, you're not happy about this baby, and he's like, if you say that one more time, and it was just like major tension. And so she so with the Heather Scott, 13 days before she was murdered, around there was New Year's Eve, and her birthday is December 30th.
whose birthday?
Belinda's.
Okay.
And so it's her 30th birthday. She's 8 months pregnant. It's December 30th, and it rolls into like a fun New Year's Eve weekend, obviously. But he's like, I've got plans. I'm going hunting.
And this is the weekend that actually the
This
murder
is
occurs?
13 days before she's killed.
You know, it's so weird because you brought up the Scott Peterson case. You know, that was right before Christmas.
Right. Well,
Yes.
this was right after.
But it's just interesting.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the falling in love with someone new around the holidays,
Yeah. People are either really depressed and then they cheat, or they're happy and then they.
Or they want like it's a new year.
A new year,
Yeah.
a new year, a new time.
Before I forget, one thing I was going to say about, of course, then right around this time too, right before they eventually go for the trial, which I'll get to, but it was many years had passed between the murder and arresting him, like 3 or 4 years, was the study that came out that said the biggest cause of death for pregnant women is homicide by the baby daddy, whether it be their husband or whatever. It's homicide. It's not a heart attack. It's not diabetes. It's not childbirth. It's just being killed.
Wow.
And I think that men just don't see the baby as a baby when it's in the woman. I mean, the men that would do
clearly.
this, the men that would do this, obviously. But I think to us, it's like, oh my God, you're killing 2 people and you're killing your child.
Yeah.
I don't think,
Right.
obviously guys that are like this don't, but I also think that they don't think of it that way. They're not carrying the baby. He has a child that's already here that he loves. There's
formed a
no
relationship,
bond. There's
right.
no bond with this little girl
Right.
that's in his wife's stomach. There just isn't.
I've heard guys. Not that they're going to murder their child, but I've heard a lot of husbands say basically they don't feel like it's even a baby until it's like looking and moving its arm, like the whole rolling him up in the, what do they call
Swaddling.
it? The swaddling.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it's just basically someone says, oh, it's just basically it's like a pile of potatoes. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, I don't even think there's even bonding there. Like, until the kid actually says dada, or there's a hugging or a reaching out, or there's certain. They don't get into their baby until like 6 months.
Right.
It's really weird, but that's just the way it is.
So he does not go hunting. He takes all the gear and goes over to her townhouse. And
Heather.
the Heather Scott, and they have a fun New Year's Eve and celebrating Belinda's birthday with. No, they didn't do anything about Belinda's birthday, but it was her birthday. And
so he doesn't even celebrate her birthday.
No, and he says to
that's
the
awful.
roommate, the roommate was knowledgeable of this information, that he was like, yeah, she's not stupid, so I packed all my hunting gear in the truck, which is sitting, in the parking lot of the townhome. To make it look like he went hunting, he packed everything.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying, like, she's not stupid, like, I better take my guns because she may off herself.
Remember, like, in Brokeback Mountain, where they pack all that stuff to go fishing, and they'd go up to the mountains and just, like, have gay sex all weekend, and then she'd be like, why don't you ever bring home any fish for me? So, anyway. So I wonder, like, did she ask, where's the deer?
Yeah.
Also, I think, and... look, I'm not a gun person. I appreciate people that hunt and do, if that's your thing. And obviously, killing someone is horrible. But I also think I'd be very uncomfortable shooting a deer. Yeah. But if you've grown up shooting animals your whole life, could you, like, shoot a human and still be able to act normal after?
Oh, I don't think there's a connection. I'm sorry.
There isn't, but I'm just saying, I don't know. Like, or did you tell yourself that before you did it so that you could get through it?
Well, maybe the actual physical act of it, but I don't think just hunting then means you can murder someone is easier. I think there's a lot more layers
I don't
to
know.
that.
I'm just saying, it's just like, okay, so anyway, years pass. Scott Peterson thing happens, so then the defense thinks that's what made them start to look into it. But they say, no, what really happened was we finally got the FBI DNA testing back from his shirt that day, because it was so backlogged from 9/11, and there was gunpowder on it.
Why would it be backed up from it wasn't 9/11 2001? Didn't this happen in 1999?
I don't know.
Is that what they actually said? Is it so backed up because of 9/11?
But
really?
I don't know. They just said it took like in 2003 they finally got it back.
That's amazing.
And so they said so then they got the arrest.
And what did
the
they find
trial
out?
started.
What did they find on the shirt?
Gunpowder.
Okay.
So then his defense realizes that the shooting range, where where the FBI people practice, was either above or below this lab, and that gunpowder could absolutely be going through the ventil system and like landing on the shirt that they're about to test.
Can't they test? Is it just gunpowder or gun residue that's on the shirt? Actually, I should really know the answer to this question, but I'm wondering, wouldn't it come from a particular gun, or I guess it's just any kind of gunpowder? I'm just kind of wondering if there's a connection. But I don't think.
Maybe there isn't. There isn't, because they wouldn't be practicing with a 12-gauge shotgun at the gun range.
Well, that's why. Yeah, I was wondering.
Well, anyway, the judge sided with the defense and said, "Yeah, we cannot use this evidence." Mm-hmm. But I guess
I would think that should be admitted, but you should be able to cross-examine on it as far as the credibility. In other words, get your experts to say, could this have been the gunpowder from the event in question, or be it from the gunpowder from the the ventilator or something.
Oh, let me show you Heather Scott for people that are watching this on YouTube. Heather Scott, I mean, she is pretty cute.
Yeah, she's definitely cute.
She's got blonde hair, a little bit younger probably than the wife, but not a lot.
Yeah. But this is also a few years later.
I think this is the first trial, is when she testified in both, because we'll get to why there was a second trial. So now it's about 2003. He gets arrested, but he does get out on bond.
Okay. Until
the trial.
Okay.
And that gun evidence is not submitted, but
at all.
No.
Okay.
But the things that were the fact that he was having an affair. Also, the guy that also kissed her that was married, he testified and said that that David approached him and was like, "What are your intentions with Heather? Like, would you leave your wife for her?" And he's like, I don't think so, or I don't know. And he's like, "What about you? Would you leave like Belinda for her?" And he's like, "I'm not sure, but I'm like falling in love with her or something." So 13 days before she was murdered on that weekend, I guess, of when he was hunting. And I might be getting some of these things a little mixed up, so you guys don't freak out, or you can write me if you want. But like, I just find this a juicy story, and we're talking about it. Okay, so anyway, he said, "I think I am falling in love with you," and she's like, "I'm falling in love with you too." She absolutely was aware that he was married, that he was expecting a second baby, and then he had a 4-year-old. And she's like, "Yes, it was an inappropriate relationship, and I feel bad about it." There's emails where she was like, "Hope you didn't get in trouble. I usually don't get that drunk." I was a little affectionate. I think before they were full blown boning, I think like there was a lot of flirting and
Right.
making out and stuff. So, he goes on trial the first time, and so the prosecution says, this is what we think happened. You know, he wanted to get rid of his wife.
Mhm.
He had the type of gun that matches the bullet that was found in her head,
Mhm.
though we don't know where the gun is.
Mhm.
But what we think happened is he killed her before. Now, either Evan, the little boy, was asleep, or maybe Evan was already like in a car seat or something, and then he ran into the house, killed the wife, to the point where like, you know, the kid wasn't disturbed by it. Then went and did the 2 errands where he was caught on surveillance doing them. So it's like 4:30 he was at like some place where the kid could get a drink.
Right.
And then, you know, and then 38 minutes later he was at a Home Depot.
Okay.
But they said it's only a 15-minute drive between those 2 spots. So why did it take him 36 minutes to enter the Home Depot after the thing? And the prosecution says, well, because he was seen near these rice fields, which is out of the way,
Okay.
by this high school friend of his that like waved at him, but he didn't have eye contact with him, where they believe there'd be like a million places to just chuck that gun and no one would ever find it.
Okay.
So they think that he went to the Home Depot,
Mhm.
then he came home, then he maybe left the kid in the car seat or something, did the quick staging of the house, which was like one TV knocked over, a couple doors open, put her purse in a closet, which I don't understand about the purse in the closet, because they said, oh, normally when she comes home, she leaves her purse and her, oh, I know now. They say normally when she comes home, she puts her purse and her keys on this counter all the time.
Right.
And her keys were on the
Stairs.
on the
really.
stairs, and the purse was in the closet. So I think what they're trying to say is that, you know, she came home and he immediately like maybe chased her up the stairs and shot her or something,
Right.
or maybe she was picking out some of her clothes and he shot her there, and then he just placed that stuff there, and maybe he threw the purse in the closet just because he was like, well, obviously they would have stolen that, but they wouldn't have stolen it if they didn't know where it was. And they're saying, no, she
Okay.
never put her purse in the closet. She would have been there. So they think that he came back from the Home Depot, maybe, I assume, left the kid in the car seat. I'm adding that part. They never explained where they thought the kid was.
Is.
Broke the French door thing, which was, he could open because he had it, throw some shit around, and then run to the neighbor's house with the kid and say, I think there's been a home invasion. Take my son. I'm going over there to see what's going on. Then he goes in the house, runs up the stairs, sees her, calls 911. They come, declare her dead. And that's what they think that state, because the defense said there was no way there'd be enough time
Right.
to have killed her during between the 4:15 and the
Right,
5:30 or whatever it was, and those 2 places. So it can't be him.
Right.
And the defense's biggest motive for it not being him is that there was this neighbor directly next door to them that was a stoner kid that was in her special ed class. And she told the parents, being that they're next door neighbors, hey, her kid keeps missing school all the time. And the parents got pissed and took his car away from his driving privileges away. and he could have gotten very angry and killed her. And he too has access to the same type of shotguns in their house, and the dad lets him use it. So they think that they were saying, everybody, jury, it's probably this kid next door.
Now, was that aspect brought up in the first trial or the second trial?
It was brought up I think it was brought up in the first one as well. Maybe not as much. No, sorry. I'm sorry. It was not brought up in the first trial because the defense was not aware that they had even questioned this kid.
Right. So essentially that would be called exculpatory evidence because obviously that everything about that kid shows that there was somebody else that had a motive and an opportunity to have committed this crime besides the defendant, Mr. Temple. So the fact that they never disclosed to the defense that there was a whole other area that could have been explored, whether they decided he wasn't a suspect or not, that I think is what was the reason why he was convicted, right? The first trial.
So he's convicted in the first trial, and then after 5 years is when this guy comes forward and says, a couple days after the murder, I was a teenager hanging out with the neighbor kid. And I walked out onto the patio, and that kid was telling a couple people about a robbery gone wrong that he had done. And he had to, and he killed a dog and had to place it in the closet. And this guy is saying, like, after 5 years, like, I've just always thought that it could have been him, and that he's referring to a woman as the dog. Like, it was really a woman. And it was really Belinda.
So is this guy that comes up and then talks about the dog, is that what kind of blew open the new trial? Because at that point in time, was it still true that the defense attorneys didn't even know about this potential other suspect? And then suddenly this guy just shows up, and then they're like, well, let's get our investigator on this and delve into this a little bit more.
Right.
And
so he does a deposition for the defense, the friend, and he's like crying, and he's like, I've just always felt this, and this is what I saw and heard. And
did the friend ever talk to the police officers in the beginning? And then,
that I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious how that all came out. Okay.
So then they get ready for a second trial.
Right.
And he gets released to be
on bail.
On bail.
Right.
And he's released for that's him with his dad.
Yeah.
And now he's gray haired, and
because he did about 5 years.
5 years, and then for 2.5 years he's home
getting ready for the next trial.
Yeah, and then the next trial begins.
I always think that's got to be almost like when we were talking about the whole owl case. Remember the staircase? It's like this idea of like, I almost think that's kind of like in a certain sense, it's messed up because you're basically saying, okay, now you're out. So you have a chance. So now here's some freedom, but it's like ice cream and let's take it back.
Oh my God,
because you never know, because you're getting ready for the whole other nightmare again. So now you're getting a taste of freedom, I think for the defense attorneys too, it's like, I don't know how long this is going to last, if it lasts at all.
So at this point, his kid is like 20-ish, and Heather's basically raised him all those years by herself because they ended up getting married. They got married 1.5 years after Belinda's death. And
so when they got married, he wasn't even charged.
No, they had like 3 years of fun.
They probably thought it was already over, and they weren't even looking.
And then for the last 5 years, he's been in jail. Then he comes home. It's not like he can work, So now she's home with him for 2.5 years.
And there's no other children. They didn't create any more children.
Not that they mentioned.
Okay.
And so now the new trial begins.
Okay. Do you know if he takes the stand in his first trial?
He did in the first trial.
Okay, he did. Does anybody ever ask him, because I didn't watch the show, you did anybody ever ask him why he did not try and save his child when the 911 operators were telling him to?
He just said, I know she's dead. Like, she's absolutely dead.
Okay, so it wasn't that he was trying to be cold, it was that
no, and he said her head's gone. Like, I just feel like he was like, there's no way, But then the defense was like, look, who's to say how anyone's going to act in this situation?
I'm curious to see if they could even, no, I guess you really couldn't. I'm just wondering if there was any way that did they try to save the baby or just too much time had gone past? Because I think that's the biggest issue, is when did this murder actually time-wise happen? Because
time-wise, I think that with trying to figure it out with her death, I think it was too hard to do it in any except for like within the last few hours, which
Right.
like both sides are saying, yeah, it happened during this time. It happened when he was gone.
Right. And
So
usually
he's
the
saying
time of
it,
death,
he's
it has
saying
to be
it
within
must
a
have
range
happened
anyway.
during those like 2 hours I was with the kid.
Right.
So no one's saying it didn't happen then, and they can't prove that it happened at 4:12
Right.
or 4:32.
Right.
You know, but the one thing that the prosecution had were these two boys that were like little, I guess they were like latchkey kids. Anyway, they were like lived behind them, and they were like probably 9, 10, and they showed an interview with one of the boys, and he's like, we got home, we took a snack, we had, you know, we did some homework, and then we started watching Dr. Dolittle, which I guess was on normal TV, so they could figure out what time exactly
Right.
that day that show aired, and they heard a big bang that they thought was a firecracker. And then the one kid goes, I thought it was firecracker, but maybe it was a gunshot. And they were able to go back, and the kids were like, it was in this part of the movie. So then that's why they were able to pinpoint
Okay.
when they thought it was. But again, it's little kids. They're watching a show. Who's to say, you know? But still, even so, with that time, still, so would make, that was the prosecution saying it would have coincided with like him doing it right before all those errands.
Well, I think it helps the prosecution because it
And
gives
then
them an
coming back.
actual. Well, it
Yeah.
gives them an actual timeline, and then even if that makes that timeline tough, then they can look at the errands that he did. They can say, well, Dr. Dolittle was at this time, so the murder would have to be at this time, and then that's probably where they came up with this outlandish story because I think it's a little crazy, but
Right.
maybe not because at least it's giving you a time frame. And I think probably the thing that probably hurt him the most is normally the 15 minutes between two errands. I could think of how many times do we go from one errand to the next and we sit in our car and we answer a few emails or we answer a few texts and we're sitting there for 5 or 10 minutes
Well-
before we even go in.
Well, one of the first times that he was questioned right after, he said, well, first we went to a park. We went to 2 parks. And they're like,
why do you need to go to, unless there's like swing
and
sets on
then,
one?
but actually then he was like, no, actually my son was thirsty, so we left. And that's where they have in the surveillance going to this Brooks Brothers. Well, no, it's not Brooks Brothers. Someplace they could get a drink, something. Then we went over to Home Depot, which was 15 minutes away, but he didn't walk through the doors of Home Depot until like 35 minutes later. So that was kind of the thing. And then
I still think it's such
also
a
the
short
kid-
period of time to do something so orchestrated. Like
Right,
we saw,
exactly.
It just seems, but I just
And also the kid that day, this is kind of good for the defense. The kid that day was at the daycare and he wasn't feeling well. And so they called her and said, can you please pick up your child? And she had like a staff meeting that she could not miss or something. So she kept trying to call him to be like, can you get away and get him? And he never answered his phone, and the people at her work were like, could tell she was really annoyed. She picks up the child and finally gets a hold of him and is like, meet me at the house to be with the child because I have to go back to my staff meeting. So he's with the child. She comes back from the staff meeting and walks through the door, and then he says, she was like, I'm tired, I'm gonna lay down. And he's like, all right, I'll take the boy to the park and do a couple errands so you can rest. Now, I'm kind of like, if you were the mom and your kid was sick that day, so sick that the daycare called and said, you know, he's not eating, he's lethargic, whatever, wouldn't you be like, I want to rest, but no, stay here. You shouldn't be at a park. You shouldn't be running around the house, running around doing errands. Unless, in fact, she was already dead and couldn't say, no, I don't want him going on these errands. Because she walked through the door and that's when he killed her, when he was waiting with the kid or had the plan.
That's true, but I also think a husband would say an annoyed wife
Yeah.
and go, let me just take the baby off your hands. And
Right.
he didn't say, who's to say that he said, I'm going to take the baby to the park? He could have just said, I'll drive around. I mean, you could take a sick baby in your car and let him rest and put him in the car seat. So
You're
that,
right.
you know, that's the...
And then I also think with the planning of it, like, really? Like, so it was planned that day and then your kid is sick and you're like, okay, shit. I was going to kill my wife today. Now I've got a sick kid. I was planning on picking up the kid up at 5 o'clock. All right. Let me kill her really quick and then we'll just run around and do a couple errands with the kid.
No, it is weird.
I mean,
and everybody can vouch for the fact that she had a staff meeting, that she was irritated.
Right.
All those people testified to that.
Right,
So it wasn't
yes.
like just his story, because it is kind of interesting to say that. And unless he was just so mad at her, you know, because she's calling up and she's like, I have a staff meeting, I'm really annoyed, and it's just really, really annoying. And then she comes home and you're like, you know, I got the son, and he comes home and he goes, you know, you're not that great of a mother, and, you know, fighting, and they go up to the closet, and the you know, they start knocking down a few things, and then he goes, you know, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, it could have just gotten to the point where the gun was there, and he goes, you know, just anything could have happened. It could have.
I mean, I
it's a little less
just can't
chance of a
imagine just like a huge ass shotgun.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to imagine. That
But,
doesn't-
I mean, they
that
said
doesn't
they-
seem
that's
like a
when
heat
they-
of passion type of thing.
Right. And
to
still, you know,
imagine.
and then I guess if that did happen, also he could have changed his shirt, wrapped the gun in the shirt, got rid of the gun and the shirt at the rice fields when the kid guy from high school saw him too, and had like a fresh shirt on. And therefore, that shirt, there was no blood or gunpowder on that shirt.
Well, that is really interesting. Now that you brought a good point. If this was really orchestrated and he had time to get rid of the gun, why in the world would he not get rid of the shirt? Like, that does not make any sense.
I think he did get rid of the shirt, is what I'm saying.
But they found the gun residue or the gunpowder
I think
on
maybe
the
it
shirt.
could be from the vent, from the
You really
vent.
do think, okay.
Or it could be that in taking off one shirt and putting on another, somehow he got a little, maybe on the inside, like maybe there was a tiny bit on the inside that was on his
Well,
skin.
it definitely, you know. Well, it's just what about his own hands? Because really, when you use a shotgun, it's not so much the shirt gets the gun residue; it's your hands.
I guess there was none at that time, so he
Okay.
must have like known to jump in the shower or wash his hands good, or if he in fact did it. So the second trial, the defense really goes after this kid who's now like 30-something, 36.
No, so now let's get a time because it happens in '99. 3 or 4 later is the first trial.
Then
5 years later, so now we're at about 10 years.
Yeah.
So is it literally almost another 10 years before the second trial
The second trial seems to have like just
ended? Right.
So yeah.
Wow. I wonder what took so long.
I don't know.
And then was he out for like literally 10 years?
No, he was out for 2.5, and I really don't understand.
I know
it.
things
But
get
anyway,
dragged out on us. Yeah.
I mean, they were giving the times of the thing. So, you know, he's got gray hair, he has glasses. You know what's kind of sad is the glasses didn't fit his big giant head. Like the glasses stopped right here at the top of his ear. Like it couldn't go around his ear.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, I wonder if those glasses are like the ones that were issued from the prison.
Right.
And he never thought to like go to a optometrist
In 2.5 years.
and got a longer thing to go around his ear. And his teeth looked awful too, but I didn't see him talk before this, so I don't know.
He had kind of like.
Yeah. Okay, so during the second trial, while it's happening, Heather Scott files for divorce against him, his second wife, the girl he had the affair with. And, you know, it was like.
And by that time, they've already been together for over 10 years. It would seem
I mean,
like.
at that time, girl, it's like, come on, that looks really bad to a jury. Like, you've stuck by him this long.
Right.
He was in jail for 5 years. Who knows if you were faithful or not? You had your own life. I'm sure when he came home, he was not sexy. You weren't turned on. I'm sure we look at Teresa and Joe Giudice, and you're different, and it's not over, and it's a nightmare, and you want a life, but like. God, could you have just waited like 2 more months?
Till the end? Till the
Yes,
end
I mean-
you really think that hurt that much?
I mean, if I was a juror, I
okay.
would be like either A, she, you know, really has changed her mind about his innocence or not.
Okay.
And maybe maybe when he was in there, she didn't really believe he was innocent, but she was like, I love raising this boy, and I see him. Who knows how often she saw him, but maybe she just was like,
You know what? I have another theory.
What?
And I don't know this for fact because I don't do divorce law or anything like that, but there might have been she might have been advised to do it before he was actually convicted.
oh, why?
I don't know, but that's my theory. I don't know exactly how it would make a difference, but it might have helped her as to what she's entitled to, what she gets, and how it all plays out. prior to a conviction. I don't, not exactly sure why
That's
that would
weird because
matter.
if he got off, and was a free man and getting divorced.
Also,
would that mean that she has to like support him for the next 20 years
Well,
and he can't work?
Exactly. So maybe she didn't want
Right.
to maybe she didn't want to take that chance either.
It was coming up on 10 years.
Oh. Maybe
Yeah.
there's that theory too.
Right. And she's the
I just
breadwinner.
have a feeling that based on what you said, I have a feeling that even though it didn't help him, she probably was getting some sort of legal advice saying, if you're thinking that this is not going to last forever, this might be the time to pull the plug.
Right. So, anyway, so their big defense move was this kid.
Right. And what
So
happened
they
then?
bring the kid on to the stand, and the prosecution questions him as well. And the prosecutor, who's a different prosecutor than before, is like, let's just get down to it. Did you kill this woman? No. Tell us about your day. Well, I skipped the last, my last class, and I was hanging out with this guy, who I guess is proven to be true. We smoked a joint. Then we drove around, which I thought, well, now wait a minute. I thought your car was taken from you for being in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Or did the other guy drive? Maybe it just
I'm
wasn't
sure the
made
other
clear.
guy, yeah.
So to try to find more pot, he goes home and turns on the TV and he falls asleep on the couch until his dad wakes him up and is like, there's cops next door and something happened. He then hears that she's been murdered. He does like an impromptu interview with media because he's the next door neighbor of like, she was really nice. She doesn't deserve this. And now it's, 15, 20 years later. And he's like in his late 30s. And he's like, no, I didn't do this. Then they brought the dad on and said, did he have access to these shotguns and could use them whenever he wanted? Yes, he could. I was like, hello, Texas. But he could use it whenever he wanted. It was in the house. He knew how to use them. Yes, and that is the kind of bullets in that gun that is what was in her head. But I guess they're very common for the shotguns. So that's really all they had to like hang their hat on, but they were like, isn't that's a motive? He was pissed, but of
Right.
course prosecution's like, but isn't a bigger motive like, here
I'm having an affair.
yes, and also like if he really wanted to marry Heather, 2 babies for a person that makes a salary like that, that's like there's no way you can hide how much you make. You work for the state, being a teacher. He would have to give up 50% of his check before taxes.
It's his baby. I'm sorry.
No,
I
I
know.
know.
Talked about this, but
Of course, but I'm saying he's thinking about his life, and I'm saying as the motivation,
right.
he's thinking about his life going forward. He's, really in love with this other woman. It's like, oh my God, I just want to be with this other woman. Like, it's fresh, it's beautiful, it's great. But, if I ever try to divorce my wife, now I've got 2 kids and I have to pay for her and I'm just a teacher at this high school. Like, anyway, and then I'm just thinking about the girl, Heather Scott, like, oh, I'm sure it was hot at the happy hour
Right.
on a Tuesday night when he's like, a football guy and he's about 27 years old. But my God, 15, 16 years later, where his
Never
glasses
end.
don't fit, he's been in prison for 5 years for killing his wife, or 10 years. He's, he's big, the thick neckness of a football player is like not cute with the white hair matching it.
And he has the big protruding chin.
Can't contribute to anything, The son comes in with his girlfriend, his wife,
Right.
and he's 24 now, really great looking, like looks like both of them, super polite and sweet. He gets on the stand and they start asking about his mother, and he goes, so you mean my mother who raised me or my real biological mother, Belinda? And so he, loved Heather. She was a great stepmother. So, in her story, did she have sex with a married man and fall in love with him and believe him all this time that somebody came in the house and killed his wife? And then they get married and she has a great experience raising this great kid that was just great. Like went to college, did wonderfully. And, she's not, you kind of feel badly for her too, I mean, she was an adulterer, but at the same time, we all know somebody, or we've been in the position where you've dated somebody who might still be married, but they act like it's over. I'm miserable. I will leave my wife for you. I mean, but then to find out that the wife was murdered, like, you know, a week later while you're dating him, and he was a suspect, you know, like, and you'd still be so head over heels that you're like, I have to
believe
live
him.
with him. I have to marry him. I have to live with him. I mean, I have to be with him. I can't imagine another day.
What's that relationship like now with the Heather and her stepson, who's essentially her son?
I mean, he said she was great, so I don't think he's mad at her for divorcing his dad. I
so
think
they still have a relationship.
that's what it appeared to be.
Okay.
And
How long was the jury out when they on the second?
8 hours.
Mm,
And they found him guilty for the second time.
okay.
But this is what I found interesting, because I didn't know if this is every state or could this be. In Texas, the judge said, okay, now go and deliberate about his punishment.
Yes.
They decide.
Yes. Yes.
But I thought they could only decide if they were going for death or life. So, like, if it's death or
Correct.
life, you choose death or life. She said, no, you say what he gets. 5
Oh,
years,
no.
2 years, probation.
Oh no, that's
life.
Not, that's not in California.
Okay,
no,
so that's
but,
in Texas.
But yes, you would then go. What we do in California is it's what we call a penalty phase. So then they would go back and they would
Right.
deliberate on penalty, which is typically on a murder case would either be the death or it'd be life without parole.
Or it could have been, or they were saying, like, so then his defense was, I guess, saying, like, probation. Like, he's already done
Right.
10 years or close, or whatever. It's been 10 years since the crime, and he's done a bunch of years.
And what did they decide on the punishment? I didn't know.
They
Texas did.
couldn't agree.
Right.
They had to be unanimous. So six wanted either 6 wanted life or 6 wanted probation. The other, and 2 couldn't decide, and 2 wanted, like, I can't remember. They were all over the place.
So what happens now
So then she goes, I declare mistrial.
on the penalty phase or on the
No,
whole-
they have to do the whole thing again.
You're kidding.
No.
Oh, this is the best part of the whole. I really needed to watch this.
And it's set to start in the spring. And so he went back to prison in the meantime.
Right, in the meantime.
Or no, is he on bail? I'm not
But
sure.
you see, it doesn't make any sense though because he would not go.
But he was convicted.
He was convicted. Yeah, it's just a penalty.
So if he was convicted for the second time, would they let him out on
No,
No. Sorry, I do remember now. No, he goes back to jail but it's $1 million bond, and I guess nobody has the money to put it up at this
Right.
point. I guess the family's like spent. I don't know.
I will check it, and you can always when you talk about it again, you say, "Hey, my sister checked it." But it sounds to me like what happened is the conviction is going to stand. They're not going to do the whole trial again, but what they are going to do is they're going to do a mini trial, what we call a penalty phase trial. And they're going to have to that has to be unanimous. Because I do agree that if in California it was like death or not, that has to be unanimous.
Right, but this is Texas, yeah.
Right, and I'll check it. But
Yeah.
I believe they're not going to start from the get-go because they found him guilty. I think what they redo again is what we call a penalty phase.
I mean, what a nightmare not only for his family, but her family. They've already been through 2 trials.
Right.
They do believe this is the man responsible.
They do. I was going to ask about the family.
The son obviously doesn't.
Right.
The son got up to plead with the jury before they went in for the penalty phase to say, like, I believe my dad 100% did not do this. He's the only parent I have.
So awful. I mean, so awful for the son and everything. It
I
just-
probably would have voted like, but then I don't know what I would have voted, because then the prosecutor gets up and is like, yes, isn't he such a wonderful young man?
Right.
Isn't he so great? Wouldn't Belinda be so proud? Well, why isn't she here to see that?
Right.
Like, she can't be here to see it. The dad can. They killed her.
Yeah.
People can go visit him in prison. Son can go visit him in prison.
Right.
He can write a letter. He can watch a TV show. Belinda, who was so excited to give birth to a daughter, had the crib already. She never got to see any of that.
Right.
She never got to enjoy anything more in his life.
But
And-
I think, but if you're actually placed in that position, you do all that argument's fine, but you still have a victim that's alive. And so you're giving this victim a chance to not
The
lose
victim, the
both of his
son?
parents.
Right.
Yeah. So I understand exactly what you're saying, but then there's
But I also think
The
it's
other
being
position.
a big, strapping 24-year-old man
maybe he's
that's
okay.
doing great in life. I
Yeah.
don't think people are going to be
Well, and obviously
decide that no, he really needs his dad outside of bars.
Agreed, but he's also, it's his dad. Of course, he's going to come up
Of
there
course,
and go.
of course.
And this is how and the reality of it is it is. I mean, as far as actual evidence, it is a little thin, but it's. I guess I'd be curious to see what was there any interviews by the victim's family as to why they thought they got the right guy, just based on what the prosecution presented, or was there some other underlying
their
stories
witness,
of
the
fighting?
witness was that that she was suspicious, that things weren't going well, that another couple saw them at a Mexican restaurant and it was like massive tension, like not a good time. Speaking of which, the Scott Peterson case, my friend used to live up there in Modesto during that time, and they were at the Heather and my other friend named Heather, and she was she and her husband at the time were members of the same country club in Modesto, and they would call them the fighting couple.
Oh, really?
Him and his wife, because she saw them like fighting
Constantly.
at this, like like in a parking lot, a couple on a few occasions throughout the year prior to her going missing.
And this was kind of the same thing that people were seeing with this couple, the Temples.
Well, just the people that were close to her knew that like it wasn't going as well as people thought.
But there wasn't anybody getting up there saying, a few days before this happened, she said, if I'm found dead.
No, there was none of that. There was none of like, if I'm found dead,
Because sometimes you get those.
But they were having issues before she found out she was pregnant too.
Okay.
So it wasn't going great. And then she found out she was pregnant. So then they were probably like, so he might have already had one foot out the door, or just been like, I just don't think I want to spend the rest of my life doing this. Like, and then she gets pregnant and he still is seeking for someone that he finds, more compatible in all those ways, and finds her and falls in love.
Was there any evidence that maybe she got pregnant on purpose with,
well, maybe that, no, but that could have been too, where he was resentful. Like, I thought we decided we're not getting along, like we shouldn't be having another baby. But I don't think there was any doubt that it was his. There was nothing like that. Like, she definitely wasn't.
Like that.
She definitely was not like stepping out.
No, I don't mean like that, but more just like, oh, well, we're not going to have any more kids because we're having issues, so you're going to be on birth control, and then she's not on birth control, or, whatever.
Yeah.
She's not,
Right. Well, and a lot of girls that are like miserable in a marriage too are like, well, let me just get one more baby out of him.
Right.
Because I want to have these babies during these years, and I definitely want to have one more, and I don't want a bunch of baby daddies, and I want and maybe you're kind of thinking, maybe it'll bring us together, but you're also thinking, at least I get my kids. Like, at least I'll get my kids out of him. And also sometimes people always feel like, well, then it was never a mistake. If I got kids out of it, I never made a mistake of marrying the wrong person.
Was there any pictures taken of like the house that was supposedly all ransacked? I mean, was there any?
Yeah.
Did it look staged, or did it look like it would have taken more than 25 seconds?
So, right, the prosecutor kind of went around the courtroom showing like, okay, this is a computer printer, but let's pretend it's a TV. I'm going to throw it over. I'm going to open 2 drawers. I'm going to run around here and put the purse in the closet. I'm going to throw a couple pillows around. I'm going to smash the French door. How long did that take? And so that was pretty powerful, I think, that it really wouldn't take that long, because the defense was saying, like, how would he have time to stage this whole thing? Well, I don't think he did that good of a staging job.
Okay, that was my question. Like, did it look like, because usually it's a little bit more thrown around, papers are all over the place, outside of the drawers. If it's just like, if it's just like one TV that's over and, a person, like a closet, then that doesn't really look like it was, a burglary that kind of went wrong, maybe more staged.
Also, I think, here, we just got this.
Oh, guess what? This is cool.
So this is it. That was the TV.
Yeah.
So what are they trying to say? That's kind of dumb. So was someone trying to take this big, huge TV out of the house in broad daylight when she was murdered? And also they're school teachers, so like, wouldn't they be home after 3 o'clock when this murder happened? Why wouldn't they have tried to rob the place during school hours if it was really the kid, or how
if
dumb
it was the
is he?
kid?
It's so dumb.
But it could have been somebody that's not the kid or the dad. It could have been a random person, and then the 3 o'clock hour wouldn't matter because they wouldn't know that they were teachers.
What is that, like a little fake gun? Oh, that looks like a little toy.
No,
for
it's just
the
a
kid.
toy. Yeah. But it's pretty
wow.
basic
And then the next
and
one is
simple.
the French door.
Oh, let's check that one out.
Oh.
Other way.
Oh, so then that's the French door. So they're saying like, you know, could he
Okay.
have opened it and then pushed it once it was already open and put the glass through the front?
But the whole thing is shattered. All sides.
Yeah.
Beyond the panels. That's interesting. I would, if it was more orchestrated, you would think it would have just been one square box.
Right.
Not all of them. That's interesting.
Well, too bad you weren't on the defense team, Shannon.
Yeah, too bad.
Well, you could move to Texas and try for the next
I don't
jury,
know.
for the next trial.
I'm not planning on Texas. I think actually California might be a little bit better for me.
So let's get into our next awful story, juicy crime story they just had a little update on this one. And this is the crime, this was so awful, and you guys
Awful.
will remember it, about Slender Man. I remember when this happened, I was doing a lot of, Dr. Drew had an HLN show.
Uh-huh.
And I was on the show talking about that when
Yeah.
I first heard about it.
Just about the crime?
Oh
or
my God! About
Slender Man?
the Slender Man became known to the whole world at the
Yes.
time because of this crime.
Because of this, yeah.
And the crime was that these two girls,
12 years old.
Alyssa and Morgan. Morgan
I think
was
it's Anissa.
oh sorry,
and
Anissa or Alyssa? Anissa. Anissa and Morgan were friends, but Morgan was also very good friends with Peyton.
Correct.
So she invites Peyton over, and to spend the night.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to continue? Like, where did they do? Then they took her like on a walk. They said we're going to go on a walk
first
or
it was
something.
it was just a regular sleepover, and I
Right.
mean there might have been some theories ahead of time, but they basically said well, all three are friends.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Morgan and Peyton were the friends, and Peyton kind of befriended Morgan first, who was kind of shy and quiet and lonely, and then Anissa came in, and then
Mm-hmm.
Anissa and Morgan kind of got closer, but they were all friends together. So they're all on a sleepover at Morgan's
And they're
house.
12 or
and they're all
11.
3 or 12, yeah, 12.
Yeah.
Which is the age of my daughter, which is even more upsetting when
Ugh.
you think about it. So they all have a sleepover, like just a regular good old fashioned sleepover. And I guess there's some talk about maybe they were going to do it that night, but they decided they were just going to let her have some fun. So the next day they say, oh, we're going to go to the park. And then there was some idea that they were going to do it like at the park. And then finally they just said, well, we're just going to go walking. And essentially what had happened is that they were walking and they walked into like the forest or the fields or whatever. And one of them was probably Morgan was carrying a knife and basically just blindsided this poor little girl and just stabbed her like 19 times.
Yeah, like just pushed her to the ground and just stabbed her
Just
all over
kept
her back.
going back, legs, hands, really left her, and then basically left her for dead. Now, whether it was Anissa was just sort of watching or was a part of it, she was a part of it, but she may not have been the actual person wielding the knife. They leave her and they just walk and get away, assuming she's gonna die.
And they're also walking to go look for this internet fictional character called Slender Man that they were obsessed with.
Yes.
And they had convinced themselves that if they kill in Slender Man's name, they're going to be able to meet Slender Man and go to his house. And they were sort of walking,
Looking for Slender.
thinking Slender Man should arrive now because we killed.
Because we've done what he wanted us to do. Yeah, and I don't really know what's going on, but apparently this character that a lot of people really, these kids and they followed him, thought he was real, and there was this idea that he was either watching kids in sort of protective way, and then also there's a theory that he was watching kids obviously to harm them. But whatever they thought, they believed that Slender Man was telling them, you need to kill somebody or hurt this person and I will reward you, is kind of my understanding,
Right.
but it's a little weird. And there's a whole history, and there's a lot of drawings, and there was a lot of evidence in this thing that maybe the parents should have been aware of this, but maybe they just thought it was internet, and they thought
Right.
she's just expressing themselves or whatever. And I think the theory of Slender Man actually was more of Anissa's obsession, but because Morgan really was on the precipice of schizophrenia, but nobody knew it at the time, just sort of the lethal combination of this gothic character combined with a rapid,
And what I
mental
also
illness.
thought was also really interesting is that both the girls, Anissa and Morgan, what I remember from reading and everything is that they both were diagnosed with like pretty bad mental illnesses. one with schizophrenia, the other one bipolar, and in meeting each other and in getting together, it's like, truly a lethal combination.
Right.
Had they never met each other,
Right.
there's a good chance they wouldn't have become murderers.
Right.
It's like the fact that they came together at that age, at that time, with these factors,
Right.
and their mental state being so fragile.
And it's
that
pretty clear
together.
And they related to each other.
What were you to say,
I was
Kelly?
going to say, they told the victim at the park to cover herself in sticks and leaves and her face and everything. That's why she didn't see that they were about to stab her.
Oh, Kelly just said that
That's-
they were like acting like they were playing a game, and they said, "Oh, like cover yourself in sticks and leaves and everything. We're gonna do something fun." And then so she's doing that, waiting, thinking some fun thing's gonna happen, and
So
then
she
just
really
starts
didn't have an
feeling.
opportunity
Yeah.
to defend herself.
And
Okay.
then Peyton, the victim, was able to crawl out of that,
Yeah,
and
unbelievable.
was like walking or crawling or something on the highway or the
It
street.
was like railroad tracks or
Yes,
something.
and then
They
somebody
became-
saw her, right?
Yes, and really by a miracle.
Yeah.
And apparently, obviously, call immediately. And this girl is now a woman. She's 17, very, very strong, and she. And
You mean Peyton?
Peyton,
Yeah.
and she's able to tell the detective, because that's what they wanted. Is they wanted to get a statement from her as quickly as possible in case she passed. She was able to tell them exactly who did this, and so while she's in the hospital, they go looking for these two girls, and they're just walking around.
Just walking down the street looking for Slender Man in his house.
Yeah, it's super weird, right? And they're not running, they're not fleeing, they're not, they're not putting the, reporting themselves either. But they're not. They're just walking around. So they go in, and then they proceed to go through the interrogation and ask them questions. I think what was really kind of very sad and just on so many levels was the parents of all three kids, really, because all parents knew each other. They were all friends, right? And even if the parent, I don't think I think the parents just had no idea when they thought, well, so and so's been stabbed. They're like, well, is it superficial? I mean, like, what happened? Like, nobody ever in a million years could have ever thought that this could have
that
happened.
their child was
So your heart
capable of it. Yeah.
right, your heart breaks for all parents, and
So what happened? So both the girls went to a juvenile detention center, right?
right. So what happens? So they're 12 years old. So, and do we know what's the state? Wisconsin?
We're gonna look up the state.
Okay.
Continue.
It doesn't really matter, but generally speaking, so they're
Yes.
okay,
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. And so I guess there's a few different things in Wisconsin which I thought was really interesting. The one thing from a legal standpoint is in Wisconsin, they can interrogate somebody as young as 12 or younger without a parent present.
Wow.
I know. So they literally gave these 12-year-old girls their Miranda rights, which is basically, you have a right to have an attorney, and you don't have to, say anything against, you don't have to self-incriminate yourself. They read them this legalese that you would an adult, and they said, okay, I'll talk, and that's okay. Like, to me, it's kind of amazing. That's not the case in California. I mean, that 12 years old to not have interrogation with no attorney present, no parent present, no anything is a little, for that age, is a little amazing. But in California, a crime like this, if you were 14, even 15 for sure, 15 to 17, you could certainly be tried as an adult. Typically for this crime at this age in California, no, you would not be tried as an adult, but you could be in custody up to the age of 25, but not necessarily. But in Wisconsin, yes, they determined based on the crime that they were going to be tried as an adult, which is, obviously if they're tried as an adult, then they could be spending the rest of their life in prison. Ultimately, what happened was they both ended up basically being in a mental facility for the rest of their lives. The first one was Anissa. Now, Anissa's was kind of a close call because even though she was not as involved
In
her
the actual stabbing.
yes, her mental illness was actually much less severe than Morgan's. So she went through first, and once I believe it was a judge, it's not a jury. Once they decided to give her, might have been a jury, I'm not positive. Once they decided to give her the mental facility, I believe it was 25 years. Then they kind of knew that Morgan would be more than likely would get the same thing, just because she had a much more significant mental illness. What's interesting is the end of this whole thing is Morgan got 40 years to life, or up to 40 years, but she can actually at any time when you do this, you can petition at any, because it's almost like a not guilty by reason of insanity.
Mm-hmm.
It's not exactly because you are, but you can petition at any point in time when you feel like you're no longer a danger to society. So for some reason, I'm not sure why, but Morgan actually can petition earlier than Anissa can, and it's interesting. So here you can be the more
Docile murderer.
Morgan can be, you can be the primary person that committed the crime, but because your mental illness is more significant, therefore
more
you're-
significant than you are, almost like less guilty, because
Correct.
Morgan was
Correct.
more severely diagnosed with mental illness.
Correct.
So they really believe that it was reason of sanity. The other girl wasn't that crazy
Right.
and went along with it. So therefore she's
Right.
more guilty on a.
Well, I'm not sure, but
But I get what you're saying
they
now.
Morgan can petition sooner based on her essentially, are you cured? Have you been treated? Are you now not a danger to society?
So how is the Peyton, who's now 17, who lived through these stab wounds? She was recently interviewed, and you saw it. How is she doing?
Well, she's adorable. She's amazing. She's strong. She's 17. She's had this great life since this happened, obviously, because
Does
she's been
she
so
still
strong.
enjoy sleepovers?
Well, no. And but that was one of the interesting questions was like,
How could you ever trust a girlfriend
well,
again?
how could you ever trust anybody again? But
Yes.
yeah, do you have an issue with trust? Yeah, she goes, yeah, I'll have an issue with trust for my entire life. Because, you can be a victim of a crime, but if it's not somebody you know, it's a different kind of trust.
And it's like
that you
little girls,
experience.
middle school girls, it is the most horrible time of anybody's life. Whether you're popular, even if you're the most popular girl and was the most popular girl and is now 35, those years weren't fun. They felt, even if you're the prettiest, nicest, most smartest, successful, everything,
Right.
most smartest, I sound like Teresa Giudice, most beautiful eyes, you're still going to look back and feel like it was a hard time and it was an insecure time. And then also the fact that I always remember, threes don't work. Threes don't really work.
Threes do not work.
Especially with little girls, like, the three of them have fun. The Three Musketeers, like, threes don't work. Wow, threes really don't work.
Really
like,
don't
two
work.
really did gang up on one, and
No.
Um,
And I think that's what was happening in this friendship too. Is I think what was happening was Morgan and Peyton, and then Anissa came in and kind of blew up the perfect friendship. And it was a little bit like Peyton was like, well, Anissa's a little weird, and I wasn't really into that gothic Slender Man stuff too. And they kind of did their own thing, but you're
Anissa
my
said that.
friends. No, Peyton said that. Like she noticed kind of like they got
they
closer.
started becoming closer,
Right.
but she still was friends with Morgan and was like,
Right.
whatever.
So threes really don't work. But certain things that she did say, obviously the trust was a big, huge issue. Another sad thing, and this was kind of a sad but kind of beautiful thing at the same time, was that through all of this, the parents, and then she had a younger brother too.
Peyton did.
Peyton has a younger brother. Parents were doing fine, but then just recently it did not. They got divorced. Peyton's parents. It's just so sad, right? So one of the things the reporter asked, I think it was David Muir said, was basically to the parents, well, have you ever, are you impressed by yourselves, but how well you handled this, how well you got through this together. And the dad basically just said, well, I don't take any credit for that. That's all my wife. She did everything. And, I'm so grateful for her for what she did. And then at that particular point, too, she kind of looks at him and you can tell that there's kind of, they're divorced, there's kind of no love lost, but at the same time, there's mutual respect. And she kind of like touches his leg. And she goes, like, thank you. And he just kind of goes, well, it's true. It's all you. So you always kind of wonder, like, what happened there? Was it just she was just picking up all of it, and he just kind of vacated a little bit? You got the feeling that maybe he just wasn't involved.
So now these girls are all 17.
Yeah.
Did they do any follow-up on how Morgan and Anissa are doing in their respective mental facilities? I assume they're not in the same one hanging out together.
It's interesting you say that. I don't think that they're in the same one, but I actually don't know the answer to that question. Obviously, if they were, they would be on different
Floors or something.
yeah, or something. They're doing actually really well. And what's interesting is when you see how different they look, like they were
Yeah.
so young, and particularly Morgan almost looked like just so vacant in the
Yeah.
eyes, you know what I mean? Really someone that's just way far, far gone. And she's not, she's kind of coming around, like she's finally, she's on the medication, she's thoroughly been on the medication for a long time. So you know, they're it's not going to be the same life, but who knows? But yeah, there is some improvements clearly.
I always think it's so weird, like in these crimes, and there's been several that we've read about and been a part of and seen, of like, you still live in the same town, like you're gonna still run into this girl's mother on occasion
Well, they do. They
at
do.
the grocery store.
Well, Peyton's mom actually said, like, she goes, I was mad at Morgan's mom for a long time, because I felt like they should have known. But now I've come around, and I don't really forgive them, but I kind of understand their position as a parent and what they could and could not do and what they may or may not have realized or anything like that. But she did say she was mad for a long time. And I think particularly
And also
with
just
Morgan,
being so incredibly grateful, like, well, thank God I'm not you.
mm-hmm.
Thank God my daughter lived.
Yeah,
and isn't the one who is the murderer, you know?
Right.
And the other thing I was going to say is, why is it, and I've asked this over the years, like, had this poor Peyton not survived,
mm-hmm.
wouldn't the punishment be way worse?
Mm-hmm.
But why is that? Why is it that when you,
Oh, I know.
why is it that being unsuccessful as a murderer
I know.
then doesn't count as much as if you were successful?
That's just the way the law is written. But I know exactly what but sometimes it's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, typically a murder case is going to be, obviously your punishment is going to be a lot greater. But like, I worked on a vehicular manslaughter case, and there was actually, at the time, he was facing more time on the DUI with injury with GBI, which is great bodily injury, more than he was on the vehicular manslaughter. He spent more time on that because there were so many enhancements. So sometimes the law does treat it a little differently, because I agree with you. In a lot of ways, if you almost killed somebody but didn't kill somebody, but you now you're
Left
the
them for
victim
dead.
and
Truly left them for dead.
I know,
Yeah.
truly left it. So now this person's really suffering, and the
Yeah.
family's suffering. That should be essentially the same. And just because they weren't successful at it, it's an interesting concept, because, but also if you have an actual victim, there's a much better chance that you're going to get a conviction, because you're going to have somebody that can testify.
Right.
When it got to that point. So at the end, though, the last question they asked Peyton was basically, if you were to see, I guess Morgan had written a letter to her or something, and she's like, and it was, a heartfelt apology letter, but she's like, well, okay, but that's just words, I mean, what am I supposed to do with that? That's just words. But she did basically say, she goes, well, I guess I have a lot to say to her. She goes, but what I really want to do is I thank her. He goes, you thank her? She goes, yeah, because of what she did, I am who I am because of what she did. My life is as great as it is because I experienced this, because this was my, not just a survival thing, but this is my life, and the way I handled it makes me who I am, and I wouldn't be this person but for this, what happened to me. So super, I mean, I can understand an adult saying those words.
Right,
But
at
to have
17.
17 to have that kind of,
Which is a common thing of when you've been through sadness or trauma, you finally get to a place of being like, yeah, I wouldn't had that strength to go for this thing, or not let this rejection bother me, or try to be this kind of a mother if I didn't have this shitty mother, or whatever the
Right.
case might be.
Like-
But you're right, that's something that oftentimes people don't recognize, but she has gone through such a public awful trial
Right.
of pain and suffering. That's
Right.
really amazing.
yeah, it was really amazing.
All right, we have one more thing to discuss, which is let's talk about this this jury tampering. Can you explain what happened here? This was a juicy story that just came out. This guy got convicted.
He's a doctor, so he's convicted back in 2012. This is Newlander. It's Syracuse, New York case, killing his wife. I don't know the facts of the actual case, but apparently they were overwhelming. He is found guilty, and basically the reason why, and this literally just happened. So he's found guilty, and then and the verdict comes after about 18 hours. After the verdict comes out, the jury is sequestered. Excuse me, I had a momentary lapse there. It's like a 3-week trial. The jury is sequestered, and when the verdict comes out, an alternate juror which is what happens is you have 12 jurors, and then you have 2 or 3 or more, depending on the case, alternate jurors. So what an alternate juror does is kind of irritating to be an alternate juror because you have to give up all your time. You have to be there for the entire testimony, but then you don't get to deliberate. But you're there during the entire time. So essentially, even if you're not sequestered, the typical rules a judge will say is you are not to discuss this case with anybody, anything, anyhow. But when you're sequestered, it's like, well, you got to talk. So she has her phone. So there's this juror. She's a young juror, about 23 years old, a cheerleading coach. And apparently, this alternate juror, after it comes out, tells the defense lawyer, "Hey, I saw her texting and talking about this case to her family and friends.
Another
all
juror
the time."
tells on this alternate
Yes,
one.
to the defense attorney. So the defense attorney, I think sometime before sentencing, does his research, puts the whole thing, talks to other jurors, and then he makes a petition for a motion for a new trial based on juror misconduct.
Okay, but this juror, this alternate juror, she never did make it in the room of deliberation. They never needed her.
More than likely. Now, why I'm saying that is because if they call her an alternate juror by definition means that you did not deliberate, but you were there the entire time while the juror was sequestered.
Right, but if her doing texting, now who was she texting? What was she doing?
Okay. So anyway, then they start to investigate it, right? Well, she's 7,000 texts apparently to her family and friends, and some of them are like, and also the people are coming back. Oh, I'll make sure he's guilty, and anyway. So
What people? Her friends and family.
Her
Okay.
friends and family. So some of them are just like, well, I can't talk about it right now, but hey, some of them are very innocent. But apparently a lot of the stuff isn't. And I guess you can check it because you can, she's also on websites looking at, the trial, which she's not supposed to do. And all of that can be diagnosed through, you can find that on a phone, on a, cookie history and everything like that. So they put all this thing together, but initially in the lower court before sentencing, they say, yes, that's egregious, but I don't find that it rises to the level where it substantially hurt his fair trial. So he's
Well,
sentenced.
I would say that too because if she still was never called in, like nobody got sick and then she got to be part of it. The fact
No. I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't make it clear. The girl that's the jury misconduct, she's a regular juror. It's the alternate, and I apologize if I was
Okay, so the
confused.
regular juror was the one that was texting and obviously had intentions from the beginning, is what they're trying to prove.
Right.
Where she didn't have an open mind,
Right.
and she had the intentions from the beginning of convicting this.
It's not even
this
so
guy.
much that. It's that the whole point of these rules that they tell jurors not to do this is so that you are deciding it on yourself. You're not looking to other people to tell you what to do.
Right, you're not looking
And
at
you're not
opinion pieces. You're
right.
not reading People magazine.
You're
you're
basing
not,
your opinion. You're basing
and
your.
wasn't some of the text with the actual family of the victim too?
No, I didn't hear that.
Oh, it was just her family.
No, it was her family.
Oh,
I don't.
got it.
No, I don't
Okay.
think it was that. It was just the idea that you're not supposed to be talking about the case to anybody but the jurors. It was the alternate juror that basically tattletailed on her.
So now,
I
even though he was
apologize.
convicted,
So hold on, but he was convicted. He's then sentenced.
okay, to
Then
what?
they take it up
Do you
to
remember what-
probably life.
Uh-huh.
Then they take it up for an appeal.
because of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
On appeal, most of the judges, but not all of the judges, the appellate court, say, no, we disagree. This deserves a motion for a new trial. But then the district attorney takes it up. Here's where, and then that one just came down, and that ruling is amazing. That is a unanimous decision by the judges saying, absolutely, this guy needs a new trial. Okay. Now, why? Because then they proceed to interview her. She writes affidavits, meaning the juror that actually did the misconduct. That is all lies. She didn't tell the truth. She started deleting all of her history. She only gave so many texts. In an affidavit and on the stand, even to the district attorney, said, I didn't say this, I did say that, I didn't look at this, I did look at this. It all was lies. It was all the cover-up. So what made it so egregious was not just the amount of texts and the amount of time that she went outside,
Breaking the rules.
breaking the rules. It was that she covered it up. Because then she's caught. So she was trying to cover up and make it sound like it wasn't so bad. So she would
Right.
only show the texts that would say things like, I can't talk about it now. And she would only, show the articles, I was just She just deleted. It was proof that she was deleting her entire cookie history and saying, "No, I was just looking at cheerleading tapes because she was like a cheerleader or something like this." So it's pretty horrible, egregious. And what the court had basically said is, because always the issue is but if there's such overwhelming evidence of guilt, just because someone didn't follow the rules, is that going to be a denial of a fair trial? And they said in this particular case it is. And then of course the DA says, and then the DA can say, well, look, I didn't know that she was lying to me when I'm arguing this. But then at the very, very end, they say she will not be charged with, lying under oath. She won't be charged with perjury or anything. So basically,
Even though she's costing the state
$100,000 to retry this case.
I would have thought it would be more.
Yeah.
And how awful for the victim's family that thought they had, won some justice.
But then you think about the defendant, who's now going to go through the same thing of the first case that we just talked about, which is and I guess it was kind of, people thought it was, I don't know the evidence of the case, so I can't speak to that. But now he is out, I believe, on bond, which is the fair thing to do. And maybe now he's got some taste of freedom, and then he's going to go through the whole thing again.
Right.
Which is, of course, still a very large victory for the defense, but the up and down of what you're going through.
Right, and then the defense has, knows what's always great when you get to redo it is, well, now we know what worked in convincing what worked and what didn't. So maybe they can actually get them off.
Well, yeah, except, that's true. But, but also the prosecution to that end, a lot of times retrials aren't so good.
Right, because they also
know the evidence, yeah.
They also know what worked.
But I just thought but she's like this young girl, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So if you're ever I think there's so many people right now that want to be on these juicy scoop trials. Just know and listen to the rules. And if you do something wrong, just fess up and call it a day, because I think it was almost the cover up that was worse than the actual
we don't want you to get in trouble.
rules.
You can be on Juicy Scoop afterwards. I had one girl on after she did a full trial, and she was great.
Yes.
So, you can come on,
Yes.
but you won't be able to come on if you get in trouble and you cause my state or any other state to spend another couple $100,000 retrying it.
And if you're on a jury trial right now, you cannot come on Juicy Scoop and talk about it.
Until it's over with.
Exactly.
Anyway, thank you so much, Shannon. Everybody
It's
can
great to be
find
here, always.
Shannon. If you have any legal questions or need any help or referral, you go to michaelgoldstein.net
Thank
and
you.
you can contact her there. She and her husband work together.
Awesome.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.